Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Febrisa. I'm a lecturer from the Department of Physiology. Today, I would like to explain to you about the endocrine physiology. This is the vision and mission of our faculty. The vision is to become a leading faculty of medicine and health sciences in which garnered Islamic trusted and excellent graduates in the field of emergency. Intended learning outcomes that assign to this course consist of two, knowledge and competence. In knowledge, the students should apply biomedical science, humanity, clinical medicine, public health, and Al-Islam Muhammadiyah concept in analyzing a problem. And in the competence, students should able to improve their self-capacity following national competence standard and character and competency standard of Muhammadiyah doctors. The course learning outcome in this Biomedical fourth consists of three. The first one is the students, after following this course, should able to analyze structure, morphology, starting from the molecular, microscopic, or to macroscopic level of digestive, endocrine, and reproductive system. And the second learning outcome, the students should able to correlate the normal mechanism in the digestive, endocrine, and reproductive system with the aspect of Islamic values, form a miracle of organ creation. And the last is the competence. The student should able to apply data and information from biomedical science on digestive, endocrine, and reproductive system in understanding the normal function of the body. The outline of this presentation consists of definition of endocrine. What is endocrine? What is the hormone types and the characteristic? How the mechanism of actions of hormones, the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. Hypothalamus releasing hormone, what are those? What is the anterior pituitary hormones and the posterior pituitary hormones? Definition of endocrine. The endocrine system consists of the ductless endocrine glands that are scattered throughout the body. The body functions are controlled by chemical signals from both the endocrine and the nervous system. So, what is endocrinology? It is the branch of physiology that concerned with the description and characteristic of process involved in the regulation and integration of cells and organ system by a group of specialized chemical substances that we call hormones. So, we can see it in the picture. There's many organs that responsible in endocrine system, that is the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the thyroid and parathyroid glands, the thymus, pancreas, adrenal glands, the ovarium in female and the testicle in male, and also the placenta in female during their pregnancy. So this is all the organs that play roles in endocrine system. And the endocrine system can works by secreting a chemical that we call hormones. This is the list of all the hormones that's secreted by those organs. We can see here in the hypothalamus secreting so many releasing hormone. They have thyroid releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, cortisol releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone, somatostatin, and dopamine. And the anterior pituitary or anterior hypophysis is releasing so many tropic hormone like thyroid stimulating hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, HCTH, MSH, growth hormone, and prolactin. While in the posterior pituitary glands or the posterior hypophysis, it secreted two hormones, that is oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. You can see here all the organs and every hormones that they secreted. What is hormones? Hormones is a chemical messenger that produced in response to specific stimuli and transported into the bloodstream to distal organs, where later they will bind with the specific receptors and will initiate many reactions. there is three types of how hormone will transport. That is something that we call endocrine, paracrine, and autocrine. Endocrine is where the glands will secrete the hormones into the bloodstream to the distant target cell. So the hormones will go into the vascular and then they will be transported into the far or distant target cell. For example, here the insulin. The insulin will secreted by the cell beta pancreas and will be secreted into the bloodstream, and then they will be transported into the bloodstream, and then they will work into the target cell in our cell in the whole body. There's also what we call a paracrine. This is where the cell will secrete a substance into the interstitial fluid to affect a neighboring cell. For example, a histamine. So histamine will work locally that will affect a neighboring cell around them. And also that we call another transport mechanism that we call autocrine, where the cells will secrete a substance that will affect the function of the cell itself. For example, it's prostaglandin that's secreted by the ovarium and will also affect the ovarium itself. To make it more clear, let me show you about what is it about the endocrine, paracrine, and autocrine. So by showing you this picture, this first picture is about the endocrine signaling, where the glands, this is the glands, will secrete many hormones. That is this purple substance, this is the hormones that will secreted by these glands. This is the glands, okay, and then it will go into the bloodstream and take it far away, and then they will go into the target cell where all the hormones later will work here. That is the endocrine signaling. So meanwhile the paracrine, that this cell, the secretory cell or this cell will secrete the hormones or the substance that will affect the neighbor. It will affect the nearer cell from them. Meanwhile the autocrine signaling is where the substance that's secreted from a cell will affect the cell itself, like for example this picture. By seeing the picture before, we know that the endocrine system will consist the endocrine glands, the endocrine hormones, and the target cell. Hormone types and their characteristics. From the table above, we can see the listing of all the endocrine glands, their major hormones that they secreted, their target organs, and the primary effect of the hormones. For example, we can here see that, there is like posterior pituitary or hypophysis posterior. It will secrete two types of hormones, right? The antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin. And this antidiuretic hormone will work into the kidney, target organs, and the blood vessel. What the antidiuretic hormone affect? It will promotes water retention and the vasoconstriction of the blood vessel. And the oxytocin that released from the hypophysis posterior will work in the uterus and in the mammary glands in the breast. And what this hormone will affect it will stimulate the contraction of the uterus and will increase the secretion of the mammary glands in the breast for a female. Okay, so yeah, this is all the list of all the endocrine glands in human body with their hormones, with their target organs, and with their effects. Hormones. What are hormones function? Hormones function it's for growth and development from a human body. It will help in maintains a constant internal environment, for example, water and electrolyte balance, to make a homeostasis condition in our body. The third, help in metabolism, in energy production, in utilization of the energy and the storage of the energy. The fourth is in reproduction, and the fifth is in behavior. That is the function of our hormones. So it works in many aspects in our body. Meanwhile, the characteristic of hormones is, first, it has to be found in a lower concentration in our bloodstream. So they have a normal level range. Hormones secreted by the endocrine glands and will respond to a specific stimulus. And the third characteristic of the hormone, it has a specific receptor on the target organ that it binds with the high affinity to that specific hormones. So every hormone has a specific receptor that will bind in a high affinity. So this is all the function and all the characteristic of hormones. The chemical structures of hormones. The chemical structures of hormones consist of 4 types: the amines, the polypeptides and proteins, the glycoproteins, and from the steroids. So let me explain you one by one. From the amines, these hormones are derived from the amino acid, such as tyrosine and tryptophan. For example, the hormones that secreted by the adrenal medulla, thyroid, and pineal glands. Meanwhile, the polypeptides and proteins are the hormones that contain less than 100 amino acids. For example, antidiuretic hormone. And the polypeptide hormones also can consist more than 100 amino acids. For example, the growth hormone. And the glycoproteins are the hormones that combine one or more carbohydrate groups. So glyco means it came from glycogen. It can be same as carbohydrate. So for example, this is the follicle stimulating hormone or the luteinizing hormone. And the last chemical structure of hormones is the steroid hormone. That the hormones it derived from the cholesterol. For example, the testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and cortisol. So every hormone it came from many chemical structure. It can be derived from the amino acid, it can be derived from the cholesterol, it can be derived from carbohydrate. So yeah, this is the types of chemical structure of every hormones. Hormones can also be differentiated based on their solubility. So that is what we call the hydrophilic hormones and the hydrophobic hormones. So to make it more easier, I can give you a hint that philic, if you see any words philic, it means like, loves, and phobics, it means like afraid, hate, don't like. So hydrophilic means it like waters. No, it like waters. So the hormones have a hydrophilic effect. It means they're water soluble proteins that freely soluble in plasma or in water or in our blood. So it has a polar effect. Since they are hydrophilic, they cannot pass the plasma membrane, and it makes their receptor in the target organ will be outside of the membrane wall. So, for example, for hormone like this, it includes the hormone came from polypeptides, glycoprotein, and catecholamine hormones. Meanwhile, the hydrophobic hormones, it is different than the hydrophilic because they likes water, because they're phobic of water, so they have to have another way to be transported in the water. They need to attach with the plasma carrier proteins, and it makes them become non-polar. Most of our hormones are like this. 90% of our hormones is non-polar. So since they were lipophilic or hydrophobic, these hormones can pass through the membrane of the cell and get easily enter the target cell. It makes their receptor will be located inside of the cell, usually in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus of the cell. What kind of hormone is this? It can be the steroid hormones or the thyroid hormone. So yeah, this is the two types of characteristic of hormones that base on their solubility. If they're polar or non-polar, is there will soluble in plasma or non-soluble in plasma that need a plasma carrier proteins. Okay, I hope it will explain to you easily. To make it more easier, this table maybe will help you to understand more. So the first is the types of the polar hormones that usually came from the peptide or in the catecholamine. Because they're polar, they're hydrophilic, they will be easily soluble in plasma, so they will be found in plasma, and it makes their receptor is in the outside of the plasma membrane cell in the target cell, and they will be excreted and metabolism very fast into minutes and hour. Meanwhile, in the non-polar or hydrophobic hormones usually came from the steroid and thyroid hormones. Because they're hydrophobic, they need a protein carrier to help them transport it in the bloodstream, right? And because they're hydrophobic or lipophilic, they will be easily enter the cell membrane and make them their receptor will be inside of the cell, usually in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus of the target cell, and they will be excreted and metabolism very slow. So yeah, this is the signal transduction mechanism. This is how every hormone will works and affect the target cell. So for the first type, for the polar hormones, they will work using another way to make the information from the outside will enter the inside cell. But with the non-polar, the transduction will directly get into the nucleus because the receptor is already inside of the cell. Let me explain you in the later picture. This picture show you about how the hormones that has a receptor outside the cell that is in membrane, and how the hormone works that if the receptor is inside of the hormones. So the first is the polar hormones. For example, the peptide hormone. Since their receptor is outside of the cell, is located in the membrane, the signal transducing, the mechanism how the hormone affect the cell, it's by the first messenger. First messenger is a chemical mechanism that included many enzyme cascade that will affect the cell. That is how the signal from the hormone will be transported inside of the cell by the first messenger system. it is different from the steroid hormone. The steroid hormone or the non-polar hormone, it has a receptor inside of the cell. It can be also in the plasma or either in the nucleus of the cell. So since the hormone receptor is inside of the cell, the hormone can easily bind to the receptor and inside of the cell and will affect the target cell directly by binding to the receptor in the nucleus or in the cytoplasm. Mechanism of hormones action. Before I explain you about the mechanism of action of hormone, let me introduce you about the receptor. Receptors are the large protein that will bind to hormone with a high affinity and high specificity. So every hormone has their own receptor. The receptor can be found in the cell membrane. It also can be found in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus. The receptor will concentrate the hormone within the target cell. The numbers of the receptor can be dynamic. It can be increased or decreased in response to physiological or biochemical factors. If it increases, it means it will be upregulated. If it decreases, it will be downregulated. So when it will be upregulated, when there is an activation or increase the production of receptor when the hormone level is reduced. So when the hormone level is reduced in our body, the receptor will automatically increase their production of receptor, trying to catch as many as hormone they can catch by upregulating their numbers. When downregulated is happen, it means the deactivation or degradation of the receptor when the hormone level is increased. So when there is so many hormone numbers level increasing, automatically the receptor will be downregulated. So they try not catch as many hormone as is possible. It is why they do this, because they try to maintain the effect. They try to homeostatically regulate our body. So the receptor will initiate a cascade chemical reaction in the cell when the receptor bind to hormone. So after the hormone catch or bind with the receptor, it will cascade a chemical reaction. It will make effect to the target cell. This is the example of how insulin and insulin receptor will facing a downregulation and will upregulating. So this is the insulin, this little black dot, and this is their receptor that are located in the membrane of the plasma cell. And when there is a number of insulin is upregulating number, the increased number of insulin, the receptor will become deactivated. They will downregulate. They will be hiding inside the cell. But when the insulin is low level, the receptor will become upregulated. They will have facing so many number. They will be activated and will become so many in front of the membranes when the insulin is low. So that is what we mean about with upregulating and downregulating. Second messenger system, the hydrophilic hormones that cannot pass the lipid barrier. Remember the hydrophilic, the polar hormones, right? They cannot pass the lipid barrier of the membrane cell. So it makes their receptor, it will be located in the plasma membrane. How the hormone will affect the target cell then? They need another mechanism that we known as the second messenger. So the hormones that needs the help of the second messenger Usually, we'll use three type of mechanism of second messenger. That is the cyclic adenosine monophosphate system, the inositol triphosphate and diaglycerol, and then the calcium ions. So this is how the hormones from the membrane will affect the target cell. The hormone usually works in a feedback mechanism. There is the positive and the negative feedback. Most of the hormones usually works in negative feedback mechanism. The negative feedback mechanism, what is it? When the hormone or one of its product has a negative feedback effect, it will prevent the oversecretion of the hormone or the overactivity at the target cell, thus maintaining a homeostatic way. It is most prevalent or most commonly found mechanism control in the endocrine system. The feedback mechanism, it has two types. It has a short or simple loops and also has a long or multi-level loops. The simple loops, it will show directly inhibit the target cell to endocrine gland. Meanwhile, the long or the multi-level feedback loops, it occurs through several level or feedback loops. It is more precise than the simple feedback and permits a greater degree of fine-tuning of hormone secretion. I will show you the example in the next slide. As we can see here, there is two types of negative feedback loop. We have a simple negative feedback and we have a multi-level negative feedback. In a simple negative feedback, we can see here when there is an endocrine cell that will release a hormone and then the hormone will get an effect on the target cell. But if the hormone is so high that we produce, the target cell will inform the endocrine cell to reduce the hormone that produced. So that is actually the simple one. But if there is a multiple negative feedback, if there is a hormone that produce so many in here, it will directly report it to the anterior hypophysis and also get reported into the hypothalamus. So there is a multi-level feedback to make reducing of the production of the hormone. So if there is increasing of hormone production, it will be affected in here to reduce the secretion of the hormone that from the anterior hypophysis and also reported here to make the hypothalamus reduce or decrease the releasing hormone production. So what is that for? So to make the target hormone that produced is low. So we have a multi-level negative feedback loop. Hormone interaction. A hormone can influence the activity of another hormone at a given target cell in one of the three ways. It has a interaction of permissiveness, synergism, or antagonism. Permissiveness is what is permissiveness? It is one hormone must be present in adequate amounts for the full accession of another hormone effect. So in a sense, the first hormone will enhancing the target cell responsive for another hormone. It permits this another hormone to exert its full effect. Meanwhile, the synergism is occur when the action of several hormones are complementary and their combined effect will be greater than the sum of their separate effects. So when there's two hormones, they combine, it will have a greater effect. And antagonism occurs when two hormones cause a loss of another hormone's receptor or reducing the effectiveness of the second hormone. So they antagonism each other. So this is three types of how hormonal will interact with each other. It can be permissiveness, synergism, or antagonism. This is the example of permissiveness. This figure shows you the ability of the thyroid hormone to permit the epinephrine hormone induced release of fatty acid from the adipose tissue cell. We can see here in the first picture that the thyroid hormone will has an effect with no fatty acid release from the cell. Meanwhile, epinephrine will affect the cell to release a small amount of fatty acid. But if the epinephrine and the thyroid hormone together, they work together, the effect is a large amount of fatty acid will be released. So the thyroid hormone exerts the effect by causing an increased number of epinephrine receptor in the cell that will make more effect of epinephrine in the cell that also will give a large number of fatty acid will be released because the epinephrine has a more receptor work in the cell that will increase the effect of epinephrine in the cell. What is the effect? A large amount of fatty acid will be released. This is this example of synergism. This is the example of synergism. So when estrogen affect a cell, they only have this response. When luteinizing hormone, they only have this response. But if estrogen and luteinizing hormone work together, it will have a greater effect. So this is the synergetic effect of hormones. What is the antagonism example? The antagonism example is the effect of insulin and glucagon. Maybe you can still remember what happened in blood sugar regulation in homeostatic, right? When there is a low number of blood sugar in our body, it will stimulate the cell alpha in the pancreas to increase a hormone that we call glucagon. Glucagon will release the glycogen from the liver to glucose and will make a number of glucose again in our body. It's different when there's a high blood glucose in our body. It will stimulate the cell beta pancreas in our body to release another hormone that we call insulin that will affect to take all this glucose back into the cell, so make the number of glucose will be normal again. So these two types of effect is antagonism each other, insulin and glucagon. Insulin will try to make the blood glucose low, meanwhile glucagon try to make glucose high. Hypothalamus and pituitary gland. Hypothalamus is also known as the master of the gland. It links the nervous system to the endocrine system via the pituitary gland. It is located below the thalamus, just above the brainstem. In humans, it's the size of an almond, so it's a very small structure in our brain. Below the hypothalamus, there is a structure that we know as the pituitary gland or the hypophysis. So this is the hypothalamus, right? It's a very small size, it's just almond size in our brain. And below that hypothalamus, there is a structure that we know as the hypophysis. That is very small. It's a size of a pea. It's about 1.3 centimeter in diameter, and it weighs about only 0.5 to 1 grams. The hypophysis is attached to the hypothalamus through a connecting stalk or a hypophyseal stalk. The hypophysis is structurally and functionally divided into two parts: the anterior hypophysis or the adenohypophysis, or the posterior hypophysis or the neurohypophysis. So the hypophysis or the pituitary gland is connected by the hypothalamus with the connecting stalk or the hypophyseal stalk. To make it more clear to you, let me show you this complicated picture. So we can see here like in our brain there is a hypothalamus, right, in the top, and below it there is a hypophysis. This is the hypophysis. Hypophysis can be divided into the posterior part and the anterior part, right? This is the posterior part and this is the anterior part of the hypophysis. The anterior part of the hypophysis is connected to the hypothalamus through a portal hypophyseal system or a vascular system. Meanwhile, the posterior hypophysis is connected to the hypothalamus through the hypothalamic hypophyseal tract or by a nervous system. The anterior hypophysis is released so many tropic hormones such as the thyroid stimulating hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, adrenocortical tropical hormone, growth hormone, and prolactin. And the posterior hypophysis only secreted two types of hormones, that is the oxytocin and the antidiuretic hormone. The posterior hypophysis is an embryological and anatomical part of the nervous system. It's composed of a neural tissue and is function part of the hypothalamus and is connected to it by infundibulum. So the pituitary gland infundibulum contains bundles of non-myelated nerve fibers that terminate as axon in the posterior hypophysis. So in the hypothalamus, these fibers is originated as a supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei in the hypothalamus. And the hormones that synthesized by these two nuclei are packed into the granule and then will transport it down the axon by axoplasmic flow. They will accumulate at the axon terminal in here in the posterior hypophysis. And the posterior hypophysis serve as a storage house for those two hormones that secreted by the hypothalamus. And it does not synthesize any hormone but releases the stored of hypothalamic hormones into the bloodstream. So there is only two type hormones that secreted by the posterior hypophysis, that is the vasopressin and the oxytocin. Meanwhile, the anterior hypophysis has a separate embryological origin from the posterior hypophysis. It is formed from a pouch of epithelial tissue that migrates upward from the embryonic mouth. The anterior hypophysis is connected. This is the anterior hypophysis, right? It's connected by the hypothalamus by a portal blood vessel that we call a hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. The hypothalamus will synthesize and secrete so many hypothalamic releasing or inhibiting hormones via this portal, right? And that hormone will control the secretion of the anterior hypophysis hormone glands. So the hormone from hypothalamus, it can be a releasing hormone or inhibiting hormone that will stimulate the anterior hypophysis hormone. And hormone that release from the anterior hypophyseal will be secreted through the bloodstream to the target organ. These are the table that's showing you the hypothalamic releasing hormones that's secreted by the hypothalamus and will affect the hypophysis anterior. There are thyrotropin releasing hormone that will stimulate the release of thyroid stimulating hormone and the prolactin in the anterior hypophysis. There is also a corticotropin releasing hormone that will stimulate the release of adrenocortical releasing hormone or corticotropin. There is a gonadotropin releasing hormone that will stimulate the releasing of follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormone in the anterior hypophysis. There is also a growth hormone releasing hormone that will stimulate the release of growth hormone in the anterior hypophysis, and etc. You can see here. So mostly in the hypothalamus will release releasing hormones that will affect the anterior hypophysis hormone. And the anterior hypophysis hormone will, by the effect of the hormone that released by the hypothalamus, will also secrete a hormone that we call etropic hormones. And this is all the names that hormones that secreted by the anterior hypophysis. We have adrenocortical hormone, the thyroid stimulating hormone, growth hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, prolactin, and luteinizing hormone. They will have different type of target tissue, target cell, yeah, and they will have a different kind of effect, and they have a way of regulating the secretion of their hormones. So I can give you example here. For example, this one, the prolactin hormone that's secreted by the hypophysis anterior, it will work into the target cell, that is the mammary glands in the breast and other sex accessory organs in female. What the effect of this into the breast, it will promote milk production in the breast of female and additional action in other sex organ. It will be inhibited by the prolactin inhibiting hormones. So this is the example of the anterior hypophysis hormone, their target organs, their action, and how they regulate their secretion. To make it more clear, this is how the anterior hypophysis hormone or the tropic hormone will work in different organs, right? For example, I give you example about the prolactin. It will work into the mammary gland, and the thyroid stimulating hormone will work in the thyroid. Adrenocortical will work in the adrenocortex of the kidney. Gonadotropin, the containing follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormone, will work in sex organ, that is in ovarium or in testic. And the growth hormone will affect the adipose tissue, the muscle, and the bone. So since the anterior hypophysis hormone releasing a tropic hormone, tropic means feeds hormone. So if they have a low number of this hormone, for example, low number of thyroid stimulating hormone, it makes the cell of thyroid is smaller or atrophy, yeah. Because the anterior hypophysis hormone, known as the tropic hormone, it stimulates the growth of the target cell organ. So if this hormone is low, the tropic hormone is low, it makes atrophy or make the size of the cell target become smaller. That is for the anterior hypophysis. How about the posterior hypophysis hormone? The posterior hypophysis only stores and releases two types of hormone that produced by the hypothalamus. That is the antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin. The antidiuretic hormone, or also known as the vasopressin, it will promote the retention of water by the kidney, so there will be less water excreted in the urine and more water is retained in the blood. At high doses, this hormone also can cause a pressure effect that causes a vasoconstriction in blood vessel, so it make our blood pressure gonna high, right? Meanwhile, the oxytocin mostly work in female. It stimulate the contraction of the uterus during the labor. For this reason, is needed for the childbirth. And female also will stimulate the contraction of the mammary gland in the breast. It will result the milk ejection reflex in lactating women. And in men, it will have rise in oxytocin secretion at the time of ejaculation. So this is only two types of hormone that's secreted at the hypothalamus in the posterior hypophysis. Let me give you example of the hormone that produced by the anterior hypophysis. The first is the growth hormone. Growth hormone is also known as the somatotropin. It's a small protein containing 181 amino acids and has two functions in the body, it for growth and for metabolism. Metabolism effect is only work in children and in adults. So, what is the metabolic effect of the growth hormone? It has a diabetogenic effect. So, it will increase the blood glucose, and it will reducing cell uptake of glucose and glucose utilization. And it has also an anabolic effect. So, it will increasing amino acid entry into the cell and increasing the synthesis of the protein. And it has a catabolic effect on the fats, so it will increase the breakdown of the fat, and it will increase the free fatty acid in the plasma. So this is the metabolic effect of the growth hormone in both children and in adult. But the growth hormone in children, it has another effect. It has the growth promoting effect. So in growth hormone will affect the liver to secrete insulin like growth factor and somatostatin C. These two type of protein will act on cartilage and will increase the growth of long bones. So it produce a linear growth of a children, so it makes them growth higher. And the growth hormone also will affect the thyroid hormones and insulin function properly, as well as the sex hormone during adolescence phase. So growth hormone in children has effect of growth promoting effect, not just metabolism effect. So many factors that can control the growth hormone secretion. What stimulates the secretion of growth hormone? The first one is obviously the growth hormone releasing hormone by the hypothalamus. The higher this hormone produced, the higher the growth hormone secretion will be. The condition of hypoglycemic. The lower the blood glucose in our body will stimulate the growth hormone secretion. The lower free fatty acid in our blood, it also has the same effect. If we're fasting, if we have protein deficiency, the growth hormone will be stimulated to be secreted more. If we're exercising, if we in stress, or if we in trauma, it also produces more effect on the growth hormone. If we have only 2 hours of deep sleep, or there is another effect of testosterone is estrogen, will have increased the number of growth hormone secretion. And what factors that will inhibit the growth hormone? That is the another secreting hormone, that is somatostatin, have an antagonic effect with the growth hormone. The hyperglycemia, if the number of increasing blood glucose in our body, will inhibit the growth hormone secretion. And if we have increasing number of free fatty acid in our blood, cortisol, if we have obesity, if we are getting old, it also has the same effect. It also gives a lowering number of growth hormone secretion. It will inhibit the secretion of growth hormone. So the prolonged administration of cortisol, this is cortisone, just like a steroid, it can cause the growth retardation. So yeah, it's a very concerning if a person consuming so many drugs such as steroid, it has an effect on their growth. And the last two parts, I will explain to you about the two hormones that secreted by the posterior hypophysis, the antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin. The antidiuretic hormone is also known as the vasopressin. It's a polypeptide hormone that's synthesized by the supraoptic nuclei in the hypothalamus and secreted by the posterior lobe of the hypophysis posterior. It's a function in water reabsorption in the distal tubulus and the collecting ducts in the kidney. And the second mechanism, it has a mechanism of vasoconstriction. It makes our blood vessel smaller diameter. It will contract our blood vessel anterior. So it has two effects. water reabsorption, and vasoconstriction. It makes our blood pressure high. This picture will show you how hypothalamus, hypophysis posterior, and vasopressin works together. If we have something happen in our body that makes our blood pressure lower, our body will stimulate by sense that and report that situation into the hypothalamus, right? And hypothalamus will stimulate the posterior hypophysis to secrete a hormone that we call the antidiuretic hormone or the vasopressin. Antidiuretic hormone will work in two organs. They will affect the kidney and they will affect the blood vessel. In the kidney, the antidiuretic hormone or the vasopressin will retain the water, will increase the water retention, will increase the reabsorption of water, and will increase the circulating volume of our blood. And vasopressin, they also work in the blood vessel. It will make the vasoconstriction of the blood vessel. It will increase the systemic vascular resistance, and it will increase our blood pressure. So there's a number of volume, there is a vasoconstriction. What happened to this? It will increase our blood pressure. So it will make our blood pressure back to normal again. So yes, remember about the hemostatic, right? This is how our body works in trying to maintain our homeostatic condition. There are so many factors that can control the antidiuretic hormone. I just give an example on the previous slide about the blood pressure, right? Basically, there's many factors that can increase the secretion of the antidiuretic hormone. For example, the increasing of plasma osmolarity. For example, we dehydrate, we vomit, we have diarrhea. Lowering blood pressure, that I give you an example in the previous slide. Lowering blood flow volume also. Aging, if we're getting old. If we do feel pain, stress, and physical trauma, will also increase the antidiuretic hormone secretion. Some drugs like morphine and nicotine will increase the same things. And the opposite, what condition will reduce the secreting of antidiuretic hormone? That is the lowering of plasma osmolarity, increasing of blood volume, increasing of blood pressure, and alcoholism. The last hormone that I will explain to you is the oxytocin. This is the second hormone that's secreted by the posterior hypophysis. Oxytocin is sensitized by the paraventricular nuclei of the hypothalamus and is secreted by the posterior lobe of the hypophysis posterior gland, right? It has two functions. First, it works in the uterus that causes the contraction of the pregnant uterus and will reduce uterine bleeding after delivery. And the second one, it will induce the milk ejection through breast by contraction of the myoepithelial cells surrounding each alveolus. So it has effect in delivering baby, and also it has effect in milk ejection. So you have to put in mind the effect of these two mechanism of how oxytocin works, right? So there's so many other factors also controlling the secretion or inhibiting the secretion of oxytocin. What factor that can increase the secretion of oxytocin? The first is the distension of uterus and dilatation of the cervix during the labor. Remember the positive feedback I give you example and homeostatic. The more dilating the cervix is, the more secreting into oxytocin will happen. The visual or auditory stimuli of a hungry or crying baby. So if a mother, breastfeeding mother, heard or see a crying or hungry baby, it will automatically increase the secretion of oxytocin. The suckling of the breast of a breastfeeding female mother, it will reflect signal from the nipple. It will increase the secretion of oxytocin from the hypophysis posterior. And the sexual intercourse or pain, anxiety, and stress also will increase the secretion of oxytocin. But what is decreasing the secretion of oxytocin is fear and alcoholism. there's a note in here. There's two hormones also that play roles in lactation, in breastfeeding, the prolactin and the oxytocin, right? So oxytocin has a role in secretion or ejection of the breast milk, but what makes the milk is by the help of the hormone that we know as the prolactin. The prolactin that will promotes the production of milk in lactating mammary gland, and oxytocin later will help them to eject, or to secrete the milk from the breast. So there's two hormones that play together in making lactation in a breastfeeding mom. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Hopefully it can give you a sight about endocrine physiology. You can still read more detail in this reference, in Guyton, in Sherwood, or even in another physiology books. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.